secure cloud platform leveraging VMware NSX and Intel technologies, presented by PhoenixNAP. Thank you for participating in today's webcast and for your continued support in the Global VMUG program. Before we begin today, I have 3 quick housekeeping items to go over. First, today's webcast will be recorded and available for on-demand. You will receive a follow-up email with the on-demand link from today's webcast, so be looking out for that in the next day or so. And second, a Q&A session will follow today's presentation. Please submit all of your questions in the window near the bottom of your screen that says questions. And third, there will be a short online evaluation that will pop up as you exit the webcast today. Please be sure to take a minute and let us know what you thought of today's session and what you might like to see going forward. All right, let's get started. I want to introduce you to today's speakers, Anthony Dezilva, Product Manager of Security Services at PhoenixNAP, and William Bell, Experienced IT Services Executive, Cloud Infrastructure Evangelist at PhoenixNAP. Welcome to the webcast, guys. I'd like to hand it over to William first.
Thank you so much, Candace. I want to thank everybody for coming out today, listening to what we have to say. Big believers in VMUG as an organization, and been a VMware partner a long time. So thank you very much, Candace, for your organization and helping put this on. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what we've been working on for the last 18 months, building this next generation VMware hybrid cloud product line, leveraging all the power of NSX and a ton of other security technologies, and really kind of how we're working with Intel and VMware to bring all of this together for the future. So as Candace mentioned, my name is William Bell, Executive Vice President of Products at PhoenixNAP. Anthony Dezilva, one of our product managers for the security services line, is going to be speaking a little later, talking about some of the nitty gritty. I hope that you guys find this to be very valuable, whether you're looking at consuming a cloud service or whether you're just looking at doing something in your colo or in your VMware environment. I think there's a lot of really powerful data in here that will help everyone get to that next level. So dive right in. We're going to talk a little bit, about the reasons, some of this market kind of conversation around why we went on this journey to build a secure cloud platform that we call the Data Security Cloud, and what technologies we chose and what different deployment strategies that we're leveraging to build this from the ground up across the globe. We're going to talk a lot about real-time threat monitoring and threat detection, and how it can play a critical role in security for the environments that you're managing or that you're consulting on. And we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty on the VMware NSX side. We've got a really great customer example that we're going to show at the end around HIPAA compliance and some of the ways that we're leveraging NSX from a security perspective and from a network virtualization perspective, and really kind of talk about this paradigm shift between network virtualization and server and cloud, and what our view that's leading consumers or operators of VMware technologies, of virtualization technologies, to have to understand, consume, and deliver for their internal or external customers going forward. And so I think you'll find a lot of those kind of key topics super valuable. A little bit of our housekeeping, for some of you guys on the call, you may have no clue who PhoenixNAP is. A lot of you that may have been in the VMware community a long time may recognize the name. We were one of the first 5 VMware cloud providers way back in 2010, 2011. And so we've been a part of the VMware Cloud Provider Program, as it's currently called, for a very long time. But you may not really know all the things that we do as an organization. We're not going to get into all of them today. But yeah, the name's a little misleading. It's something that we talk to people about all the time. But we've built this large-scale global infrastructure platform with VMware kind of at the core from a cloud services perspective. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why and some of the decisions that we made and why we continue to focus and partner with VMware so strongly even kind of in the face of VMC and some of the things that they're doing there. I think there's a lot of interesting ways that the cloud is going to expand and be delivered in so many different iterations, so close to the edge, so close to the end consumer, that we're all truly having to work together to accomplish some of this. So gonna move on to that next step. The ethos of our global platform is infrastructure as a service. We started as a co-location company in Phoenix, Arizona, and immediately began building probably one of the most broad infrastructure as a service platforms across the world. And what we're doing today is we're leveraging all of those technologies and intellectual property that we've built to deliver high value services on top of our platform, and as we look to the future, on top of other cloud services platforms, really to give that customer the complete hybrid story that they're looking for. And as we move through today's conversation, we're going to be talking about data security cloud. We're going to be talking a little bit about our security services, what we call InfraSentry, our managed detection and response platform. We're going to be talking about those things a little bit interoperably, and to some extent they are interoperable in terms of the way we execute some of these service lines. But it's important to kind of understand the context of today's conversation and the challenges that we're helping customers address, and who we are as a company, which is a much broader, much longer conversation than what we have to talk about today. A lot of our engineers have been focusing on the VMware Cloud Platform product lines for a very long time. So I encourage, as we kind of move through this and past this call, if you're looking at, even stuff like VMC on AWS, which is getting so much technology push right now, if you're looking at that, I encourage you guys to reach out and talk to us about some of the differences in the way various VMware-based cloud platforms are operating and the different technologies that are being delivered to you as an end user, and really kind of focus on the solution and the end state versus the hype of today, right? And what the buzzwords are right now. So when we look at our organization and we're looking at the things that we help our customer with, we're truly trying to partner, right? We want to partner with our customer to create this end state that makes them, either their IT department, their company, more valuable to their consumer, which is either a shareholder or the shareholders of that organization may be external. Stay flexible, focus on security, and provide real leadership in that cloud services space. And so this is our commitment to our customers, our prospects, and to the market, kind of as we look at this next 10 years, which are going to be really exciting for not only cloud service providers, but for consumers looking to kind of adopt this cloud story. And this is kind of a little bit of the technology landscape that we're going to dive into today. The PowerPoint's provided to you in the handout section of the GoToWebinar, so you guys can download this. You can take a look at some of these decisions that we made. We're not going to talk about everything on this page, as that would just take too long, but there's a lot that we're doing here, even inside of just cloud-based data protection and security services. And so it's important that you understand these technology choices, and anything you don't understand, please feel free to reach out into the questions area. We'll try to make this interactive, and either myself or Anthony during the presentation will be reaching out to try to answer some of those questions live during the call, not just over text in the background. So hopefully you guys will speak up and leverage that tremendously. All right, so you look at everyone's favorite big brother, Gartner, and what they have to say about the technology and services topics that their customers, their survey respondents are looking at from 2017 and into 2018. They haven't reproduced this yet for 2018, but when they're looking at things that have to do with security, this, far right bullet out in the top right of their, somewhat scatter plot magic quadrant they've got here is cloud security, right? If I move all my data to the cloud, what does that do to me from a security and compliance perspective? And I'm not just talking about infrastructure as a service. Gartner's not just talking about infrastructure as a service. They're talking about all cloud security for all types of cloud services, for Office 365, for Salesforce, for anything. And we're going to focus on a subset of that for sure. But it is a big deal. All of the things that you have either been consulting on in the past with your customers or are implementing if you're an end user of VMware technologies has had a security element to it and a trust level that whether it's a documented confidence level or it's just a perceived confidence level, you feel secure in your on-premises virtualization environment. You're leveraging best-of-breed security technologies, Cisco firewalls, whatever that is, to protect your data, likely endpoint protection, antivirus, etc. And you feel good about what you're doing today. The problem that you're faced with is the business is driving you to adopt some type of cloud service, whether that it's SaaS or PaaS or infrastructure as a service. They're driving you to do this because the business, quote unquote, is tired of investing capital in technology. We are big believers in investing capital in technology, even for our end customers, right? That's why if you look at our website, co-location is so predominant across it as well. We believe in investing in assets that make sense to a business. We're definitely in the camp that hybrid, true hybrid, some things on-prem, whether that means truly on-prem like you're used to consuming, or whether that means on-prem of the future, right? Maybe some type of OpEx-based, dedicated private cloud or something like that. There will always be that component due to cost considerations, compliance considerations, security considerations, whatever that is, and the public cloud. And when I say public cloud, I mean the true public cloud, the hyperscaler, right? So I think that whether you're adopting an all-in cloud approach or a partial hybrid cloud approach, security is of the most paramount importance. And the more distributed your data gets, whether that is multi-cloud or on-prem hybrid to public cloud, the more distributed your data gets, the harder it is to secure. So you have to be investing in technologies to help you understand what you've got and how you're going to take care of it as you move through the next, even 2 to 3 years, right? Because this is coming fast and furious from an adoption perspective. And I think the kind of hand in hand, so to speak, components that go with security is compliance. And a lot of people misunderstand security and compliance to some extent believe that they're the same thing, that if you do something from a compliance perspective, that you're acting in a secure manner as well. And in a lot of ways, that is the case. In some technical considerations of compliance, there are security implementations that are happening to help achieve a compliance stance or a compliance stance, but it doesn't mean that you're actually securing your data just because you pass a compliance audit. However, they're both required. right? For most organizations at this point, they're both required. And so it was important to us that as we built out this cloud platform across the globe, that we could handle compliance in a much more deep fashion. We can't do everything for you, right? I mean, there's a lot of things in these compliance efforts that require your organization to get on board and do a lot of stuff. But from a technical perspective, that we could handle compliance stances of the most stringent regulations and actual ongoing operational security of that environment. So both of these things are really important. And you'll see that kind of as we talk about the solution we created in a little bit more depth. So the risk, the pain, why are we doing this? And I'm going to talk about why we're doing this over the next 2 slides. Why we, from a capitalist perspective, felt like this is something we should do, but also from a technology service provider perspective, what we felt like we could help with, right? And it starts here, right? In this very microcosm statistics report here, talking about breaches and the outcomes of these breaches. I hope by now this is stuff right? It may not be resident in your brain because it hasn't happened to you yet, but if you haven't seen a presentation from somebody that says that security is important and that breaches are occurring every day and it costs a ton of money, whether that's reputational damage or actual physical, paying for people's credit monitoring or whatever it is that costs your organization, it's real, super real. And if you're not thinking about this as an IT person, I guarantee you the business is thinking about this stuff from a completely business perspective. And some of those things, if you're not ready to address them directly head on with the business, they can really catch you out when a C-level executive steps in your office and says, what are we doing from a security and compliance perspective? My buddy got hacked yesterday, and now he's got, the government's all up in his business asking him, what he's going to do to address these problems in his organization. So definitely something to kind of be aware of. And as we dive a little bit further into what we're focused on as an organization, this picture right here from this last Verizon data breach investigation report, the one with the big red arrow that we're trying to kind of highlight, and really what fits our customer base is 58% of the victims of the Verizon data breach investigation report were small, medium businesses, and really even small businesses to some extent, right? Verizon considers a very large businesses small, but I don't know if they actually list the exact number that they use to derive small business, but I venture to say they're including $100 million plus companies in small business. And it is a vast percentage of the victims because they are not well prepared to protect themselves. And, as we looked at the market, as we looked at the kind of global landscape of managed security services, of secure cloud platforms is kind of a misnomer, as there's not very many people playing in that space. And we looked at companies with the ability to do it themselves and the way that they're investing. All we saw was this huge gap between what the value of the data that these businesses possessed to outside attackers and the amount that they were investing to protect it, right? And the affordability of the services that do exist to address these problems from a third-party perspective is somewhat non-existent as well. In the MSSP world, we see 2 kind of major players, so to speak, groups. You have gigantic organizations that work with gigantic organizations, solve really hard security problems, and charge a ton of money for it, right? Or you have very small regional MSSPs doing very small business, installing antivirus, doing some type of threat investigation to say from a very light perspective, and really just kind of basically not solving difficult customer challenges for their organizations. So you have kind of two options, right? You have two major options when you're looking at this. You can either build it yourself from scratch, do everything yourself, or you can, choose to partner. And what we felt like some of the value of partnering lies in these three critical areas. You've got an immediate return on investment through consuming a service, whether that's a managed security service that you're comfortable with, or a managed security cloud service where you're actually putting your data, hosting it, and letting someone take care of not only the cloud infrastructure platform, but also the security service. You've got this gigantic problem of skill gap in security in the United States. Absolutely monumental, impossible to overcome to some extent, security gap between trained security professionals and the need for those professionals inside of these organizations. And what we see a lot of companies, kind of crying uncle and saying, look, we tried hiring a security person, but they were really expensive. They were always demanding more money. There was no way we could ever afford two. The one guy couldn't get enough actually implement in our organization to make a real difference. So we just said, to heck with it. And so that's a massive problem. It's hard for even companies like ourselves that are employing people with the specific intent of helping others to drive revenue and profit. People like us that are able to pay a lot more for that person. It's hard to find people even with those needs in mind, let alone a small business or even a medium-sized business trying to secure their enterprise. And so you get this opportunity to have immediate enhancement of security that can control the business risk, and really start focusing on what you do as a company and not on securing data every single day. So I think at this time, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn it over to Anthony. He's going to walk you through some of the major components of really building a great security strategy, talk about some of the ways that we're handling these issues, and kind of take us to the end. I want to thank you guys again for joining. Take it away, Anthony.
Hello. A lot of familiar names on the list. So for those of you guys who know me, will know when I talk about architecture, right? You gotta have a good architecture. You gotta have a good foundation to base your solutions on. You can't, and you've got a lot of history in organizations. You've got a lot of legacy systems, legacy ways of doing things that play a role. And when we looked at how we build a secure cloud offering, we looked at, well, let the legacy not play a role. Let's look at architecting this from the ground up, looking at everything new. That being said, policies and procedures. Again, with security, the policies and procedures matter, right? How you go through things, how you do things, how you report on things. You want a good, solid policies and procedures when you're looking to create an environment that is secure and that you inconsistent, having a good plan. Now, the big thing is you got to know what you got to know what you have so you can protect it. You've got to have baselines. You've got to have something to compare against. And this becomes more important as we talk about the threat mitigation and threat management and how you detect anomalies within the system and how you defend against it. Obviously, you got to monitor your infrastructure. And the whole idea is to get early warning. Now, when I say monitor, I don't mean put your logs in a log aggregator and let it sit there and then go look at it when something really needs you to go look at it, right? I mean, use that in a way that will actually, it'll tell you stuff proactively so that you can actually react to it and basically detect this thing and react to it a lot faster than waiting for the user to call you, for instance. And finally, you got to be able to mitigate and recover. And basically, you got to learn from it. Right? Every time something happens, we literally look at it as an opportunity to learn from the experience and how can we do it better. Now, that being said, actually, can we go to the next slide? When you look at security solutions, not you got a lot of vendors out there, and you look at, not everybody can do a complete holistic solution, right? Not everybody has that silver bullet to protect you on security. So when we looked at that, what we did was we literally looked at an integration model. How do we integrate the best of these solutions so that we can create a holistic solution? And we looked at that in a couple of ways. Disaster management, something we do well. We tied that into the solution so that we've got that as a component. Threat management, 24/7 SOC. You've got the security. We actually used security orchestration. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. Obviously, tying endpoint security, patch management, all these components that create a good holistic offering. Now, typically, we haven't talked about this kind of stuff in a cloud environment, right? When we talk about an on-prem environment, we certainly have these different components. When we talk about workstation security, we talk about endpoint security. We've got a lot of these in a traditional sense, but now we're talking about how do we take that and implement that in a cloud environment? And that is what we basically did when we created the Data Security Cloud, is we created this holistic solution. Next slide. So what does that mean? Kind of took a look at this. How do we go about doing this? Well, data is your most important piece, right? What somebody wants is that data. That's where the value is. Well, let's put that in the middle. Let's wrap that with basically back up and make sure we can let's wrap it with encryption. Let's make sure we can encrypt this thing at rest, encrypt it in transit, encrypt it in so that if it was disclosed, at least the data can't be read. Then we wrap that again with an operating system that's built and hardened. We add backups so that we make sure we've backed that information up. We use NSX micro-segmentation or technologies like that to actually protect the machine and control the communication machine to machine. Traditional networks, we have a LAN, or an open VLAN segment. Machines talk to each other. We don't control that traffic at kind of that machine to machine or port to port level. So now with the NSX technology, we gain that capability to lock this thing down port to port type communication, right? We use a reference architecture, and we tie threat management, basically that watchful eye, on top of all of this, so that when something is misbehaving, we actually get to spot it and we get to do something with it. Obviously, we're working very closely with VMware, with Intel, with Veeam. We've integrated these technologies very closely. We're using some of the latest technologies in NSX and vCloud Director to provide these services to our customers. And this is a multi-tenant environment. We've learned a lot. We've run multi-tenant environments for a long time. We've learned a lot of things, like segmenting out your management cluster from your compute cluster, having things separate so that one doesn't affect the other. These little things that we've learned over the years, we've incorporated again into this infrastructure to give the environment the best value. Next slide. And it's all about layers, right? It's about layering these technologies. So kind of starting with the proven base. Obviously, being PhoenixNAP, we've got a sustainable global infrastructure. We've got every one of our customers gets a multi-carrier blended circuit for their communication. We've got DDoS built into our network. It is not an optional thing you get. It is part of our network. All of the entire thing is, the fabric is redundant, including our communication to the remote data centers, right? Highly scalable hardware platform. Again, based on the latest Intel technologies, advanced hypervisor technology using the NSX. And we talked about segmented components, and we talked about threat management. Let's jump into threat management. Next slide. So, actually, back on the layers, right? Compliant platforms. And again, one of the things is we talked about compliance doesn't equal security, but gaining compliance, meeting the requirements for compliance certainly gives you a level of confidence that you've done the right things to create a secure platform. So we've definitely done that with PCI compliance certification that we got for this environment. But also what that means is you can now PCI-based workloads that you would normally have to have in a colo type environment or an on-prem type environment, you can now actually leverage cloud infrastructure and implement that in that cloud infrastructure. Now, I believe with the technology we have at the NSX and the capabilities we have, we can do a lot cooler things, a lot easier in this cloud infrastructure than we can in the physical environment. We can still do it. It just takes a lot more hardware. With the virtual infrastructure, we can do it easy. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the demo. So how does threat management work? Obviously, the SIEM is the central part of threat management, right? Customer log sources come in. We get threat data that comes in. You correlate the two. You basically look for, do I see patterns that match? And then you throw up an alert. That alert, then you decide if that alert's a false positive, which in case, if it is, you go and tune it out so that it doesn't happen the next time. Or if that alert's real, you actually go into response cycle. You go do something with that. Now, next slide, what is it? We'll go ahead and, there you go. So what does that look like in the DSC environment? Well, you've got your virtual environment, you've got your edge. From your edge, basically you're getting your syslogs. We use logarithm as a SIEM technology. So we have these logs ingested into the logarithm platform. We take the threat data that we get, and we've got multiple sources of threat data that we get. We also use Sophos as our endpoint security. So we've integrated that Sophos cloud data into the logarithm as well. Now, again, what happens is if logarithm finds something that flags the behavior, we use Swimlane as an orchestration. So an orchestration tool, basically, when the ticket is open with the orchestration tool, it provides our analysts with all kinds of data that it has already integrated via API. So it'll go out and look at the IP address. It'll go out and look at the elements of the ticket that flagged. It'll pull all these things on a single pane of glass so that the analyst already has it in front of them, saving them time. Again, the goal is increased response, increase effectiveness of the response. If the analyst looks at it and says, yes, this is real, I need to do something with this, we go through our analysis, we make the recommendation, we work with our customer to implement that change so that we mitigated that threat. Next slide. So again, going back to, well, how should we do this? What's the right way to do it? NIST, the NIST framework is a popular framework, and we've adapted that in our implementations. Going back to the NIST framework, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. As we went through that big list of solutions up in front, we've basically created solution sets for each of those elements, including leveraging our backup and recovery capability to recover the environment. NIST also talks about, well, threat detection, secure device management, and vulnerability management. These are all pieces of the puzzle. Patch management falls under vulnerability management, right? Not the easiest thing in the world to do, not something that people want to do, but because it's important for security, it's something we are building as a service for our customers. The next slide. So we talked about threat sources. Obviously, we've got the open threat sources, we've got the community intelligence, our vendors provide us threat data, we've got our own corporate policies, we've got the customer policies that basically dictate what can and can't be done. We've got the context of what you're looking at. And we work with a lot of ISAC type organizations, including ACTRA here locally, which is a threat intelligence sharing organization amongst private organizations. And we've got our global presence. So we're looking at a very large data set. Why does that matter? Well, that matters because when you look at a picture, the higher the data points, the higher the resolution, right? So in the same vein, the higher the resolution of the data points we're looking at, the better we can decide or understand that this is a real security threat and the likelihood of the security threat is X. And we get to then act on that and we get to prioritize that over some other threat that could have less impact. Next slide. So real-time monitoring, basically to identify the threat. We obviously run the baselines. We compare those baselines against the activity, again, looking for, is this behavior normal? Is this behavior that we're seeing an early warning of something that's going to happen or something that's in progress of happening? Obviously, this all requires centralized login. We pull this data right off NetFlow with the various syslogs, all that information, and then we do the behavioral analysis. That's just a summary of everything I kind of talked about prior. Next slide. So, customer case study. In this case, what we were protecting is a customer that had sensitive HIPAA-related data that they wanted protected. So, obviously, if you look at from the right side, the secure zone, this is the website. It's a WordPress website. They've got the applications built into WordPress. So the first thing we did was separate out the database from the website. And we took that database, we put it on a database server inside of a secure zone. We locked that thing down. The only thing it can talk to was the web server, period. It couldn't talk to the internet. Now, it obviously required internet access for patches and things like that. And what we did was we used a proxy server inside of this environment so that machine could talk to the proxy server, do its updates, and then shut that back down. The web server itself, same thing. Now, both of these we used hardened images, right? The NIST 800 171 based images on CentOS. So we used hardened images, and we basically locked all the ports down. We obviously changed passwords, set up access rules that only the machine from the inside can talk to the machine from one zone to the other. No one from the outside could talk to it. It's a very hardened environment, and we use this multi-edge type idea to basically create the physical network segmentation inside the environment, and we used ACLs to actually control all that communication. Again, implementing micro-segmentation. Now, we have all of this fed into a log collector, into Log Insight, so that we've got real-time login, we've got real-time reporting going on. In this particular case, there was data we needed from a backend server. So we have another remote VPN connection, a multi-hop, multi-control VPN connection into a corporate database that then hits a SQL view. I'm not going to get into the technical details of all of this, but in front of all of this, we've got a hosted WAF CDN technology that protects kind of the threats. I think we're stopping 900 different threats a day before it even hits the web server. And then we've got all of this other infrastructure behind that. So we're pretty happy with the success of this. We believe that we've built an infrastructure that will be very difficult to build in a physical environment at a reasonable cost that we did on this virtual environment. Now we can take the, theoretically, we can take this next step and do this 3-tier architecture where we've got a transaction server in between all of this, again, creating another level of complexity and making it harder to get to that goal at the end, which is that database server. Next slide. That's kind of summary. Actually, at this point, I will turn it over to questions. I don't see any in the chat, so anyone have any questions?
I got one question that had come up early, Anthony. How long did it take that customer to get that environment set up? And are they migrating from on-premises or from another cloud service?
We actually migrated from another service. Between all the different design and stuff like that, we spent a couple of weeks bringing the customer online. We tried to do a bunch of different things, but overall, I think it was 2 weeks. We were down, flat, and up and running.
Right. And the other one I got, and I'll field this one. Somebody had asked you, they're looking at VMC on AWS, and why would they go with a cloud provider that was leveraging VMware versus that? And I think the ultimate answer to that comes into what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to just get out of the hardware business and still do everything that you do today? From a management, from a security perspective, from a skill set perspective, all those other challenges. If you feel like you have those things covered, you're just looking to get out of that the buying the hardware every 3 years. VMC is an amazing product. It's very well worth your consideration. There are a lot of players out there that have very cost-effective infrastructure as a service only product lines on VMware. It's not just us. But I think really when you look at something like Data Security Cloud, you're focusing on shifting the responsibility and the ongoing operations of not only the hardware maintenance and patching and things like that, but the security operations, the day in and day out security components that you're working on and worried about, the data protection components that you're having to manage from a backup perspective, from a DR perspective, being able to consume all of that as a service, along with many, many other things, both today and future forward. I think that having that provider that you can trust, that you can call, that can deliver the same service for you in multiple different geographies across the globe, I think that's really where we shine through, and that's where we show a lot of our value. Those were the really two major questions. If anybody has any questions, just pop them in the questions box, and we'll try to jump on them. I'll give it another minute for someone to tap.
So I'll address Lewis's question. So how long did it take the WAF and the IPS to learn the environment? So the WAF currently has not been ultra tuned. I did some basic settings on the hosted environment, and that's what's protecting the environment right now. So I kind of set up some basic profile and then activities and stuff like that. The application doesn't do anything crazy, so it didn't require a whole lot of crazy tuning. It's a standard WordPress application, so we identified it as such, and it implemented kind of the standard WordPress related WAF settings. So just with, I guess, very little tuning, we've got those 900 hits that we're actually protecting against. I hope that answers the question.
I think that was a great answer, Anthony. There's a question from Henry about sharing the user case. If you look at the handout section, there is the whole PowerPoint, so you guys can look at that. The example that he gave was a healthcare example in the PowerPoint, so you can get some insight into that, and Anthony can definitely address the other questions that you have directly. Paul asked, what's your mean time between detecting a security anomaly and getting a customer resolution? I like that you stated it that way, right? Usually the challenge is finding the problem, right? And that's where we're focused every single day, detecting the problem itself, and then actually taking a customer resolution. That's one of the big differentiators between what we're building and servicing versus what an MSSP is typically going to do, right? An MSSP is typically going to do what they call detect and respond, or sorry, detect and alert. They're going to find the problem, tell you have a problem, let you resolve it on your own, right? What we're focused on from a data security cloud perspective is providing resolution and incident response as part of our platform. And it's not in our very base package, but that next step up provides you this level of IR. It's not boots on the ground in your on-prem in Warsaw, Poland, right? But it is people actively working with you to mitigate security threats. It varies very heavily, Paul. So when we look at how long it takes us to actually get a resolution for a customer, it can happen in seconds. We're working on some components through security orchestration to be able to do things like isolate a VNIC based on a detected security threat, inside certain parameters, so we're not taking major applications down, those types of things. We're also looking at a ransomware example where we're able to get a customer back up and rolling from a backup from 4 hours ago, because in Data Security Cloud, you don't have a virtual machine that isn't backed up, period, right? Every customer gets backups by default by consuming the cloud service, right? And so if we had a customer that had a ransomware event, we were able to literally restore from the backup from 4 hours ago through other types of isolation, mostly micro-segmentation and everything that we're doing from an NSX perspective. We heavily limited the exposure, i.e. the east to west communication, spreading of the ransomware. So I think that definitely helps. It is, we have resolutions that are still ongoing, right, Paul? That's just one of the problems with security, is that depending on what the actual issue was faced, it can vary very, very greatly. So I hope that answered your question, gave you some small examples. If there's anyone else, I'll give you 15 seconds to pop it in there. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone so much for joining. I really hope this was insightful. It wasn't just some, vendor pitch. And I think we gave a lot of really good hardcore examples of what you can do to really help improve your environment, whether you're consuming a cloud service or you're doing everything yourself. And now I want to turn it over to Candace. Thank you very much to the VMUG, and thank you very much again for attending.
Thanks so much, Anthony and William, for taking the time to speak to us today. It was great having PhoenixNAP part of our webcast this week. As a reminder to the audience, you will receive a follow-up email with the on-demand link from today's webcast, so please be looking out for that. And to find out more about our webcast program, please visit vmug.com/learn. And lastly, please be sure to complete the short online evaluation that will pop up as you exit this webcast today. And from all of us here at VMUG, thanks so much for joining, and have a great rest of your week, everyone.